Hi, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and we have a very special guest with us today, Suzanne Munson. She is the author of 6 books that are on Amazon. 2 are also in the works, and the name of an amazing book of poetry is Of Loss and Love, A Journey of the Heart. Suzanne, I want to thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story and expertise.
It's a pleasure, Melody.
Yeah, so I want to talk. I have read your book of poems, and it's amazing. I love the way you put so much emotion, and you were so vulnerable in such a short prose. You know, it was like I was on the journey with you. And the poems are short, but they have a powerful boom to them, I think, and you really hit you in a certain way. I wanted to talk because you go through your journey, and you go through your journey of grief, of the loss of your husband, and you talk a lot in the beginning. You talk about the beginning, and then you have a middle, and then you have your growth at the end. Um, and in the beginning, you mention a poem, or you begin with a poem entitled April. And it's something that you say, I love the spring, I love these wonderful, beautiful things. But you had a line in there that said, good is too much uh, for me. And I just wanted to touch base on, how does that feel when you have such a traumatic event and then all of a sudden you're lost? Do you really feel any of the good things? Are you ready? Can you speak more on that?
Yes. First of all, when you talk about my book of poems, um, most people don't read poetry anymore, so I like to call them reflections and not scare people off that it's just a book of poetry, because this is a journal of my journey after my husband died in 2013. And the poems are real. I don't make up stuff; they come right from the gut. And I read one to a group the other day, and I had read it 100 times. It was about selling my husband's car at the used car lot. Anyway, I still have to cry over that one, and other people do too. It's sad. But getting back to the first poem, which is April, um, when my husband died in February, I was very busy with thank you notes and business matters and looking into the banking and all those things. And so I stayed busy for a while. And I guess I put off my grief. I was grieving, but I really put off the deep grief. And that came on this beautiful April day. And I've always loved spring, it's always given me great joy. But I wasn't ready for all that beauty that day. The bright sky, the birds, everything happy. I didn't feel happy. And so I wrote about that. And the first line is a quotation from T.S. Eliot from his very famous poem, The Wasteland, and begins with, April is the cruelest month. I didn't understand that until now. Then it goes on to describe how I was feeling at that time.
Yes. And one thing that I really felt strongly was when you said, towards the end, you talked about retreating inward to a gray space.
Yes.
And I think that's what we do as trauma, and I'm sure our listeners will agree when they experience their trauma that they reverted inward. How did you get over that?
Well, the poem says that that February, my husband died in February, that February covered my heart um, in a soft gray way. Winter, low energy, that sort of thing. But that soft gray covering was ripped off in April. And then I began to retreat and look for a soft gray space inside.
Yeah, and I think that's what so many of us that have experienced some type of trauma or grief, we do that. We tend to take the pain inward and not really show it outward. And then I love your journey, how you really talk a lot about skin. Skin is woven throughout the book, and you speak about how you need to have all of your five senses and just the way skin feels, and you hadn't had that touch on your skin. Can you explain how you were able to incorporate using your five senses to kind of ground yourself as a grounding technique?
Well, I found that the poems just came to me, not in any particular order. And I had enough. I actually don't know how many poems are in the book. Let's say there are 25 poems. I don't know, 30. And so after they were all written, I realized that they were in certain categories. And so as I began to process my grief, I got uh, into mindfulness in a big way, being mindful about our five senses, which we mostly neglect. We just, trudge on in life and we don't enjoy the five senses that our creator gave us. They were given to us to enjoy. And so there are a couple of poems that specifically talk about skin. One is called Warm Towels, I think.
Mhm, mhm.
And I take warm towels from the dryer and hold them to my heart. They are the closest thing that I will come today to a hug, something like that.
Yeah.
And then I say that young animals who have lost their mothers are given warm towels, support. Um, Not real, but warm cottons can have a real feel. It's expressed better than that, but that's basically what I said. And then I wrote a poem called Skin, and that was written at a writer's retreat up in the mountains, and the retreat was owned by uh, a woman who was married, and her husband was there. And I was in a deck chair overlooking a little lake, and she and her husband were sunning themselves on the platform on the lake. And I said, I miss the lover's touch. It's My skin has been asleep for so long. And then I look at the couple, and tonight they'll sleep skin to skin. And then I said, I described the scenery. It was very beautiful scenery. And then I said something about that my sense of sight was very good, but I had lapsed my sense of skin, been neglected all these times, and that I was going to sort of be more mindful about that. It's expressed better than that, but yeah, people like that poem.
Yeah, it's just so powerful, I think, just to think about how we don't, and you even touch on this in the book, how we don't take moments for those small things in life. The poem is called Sandwich, and I loved it. You were talking about how we make the sandwich and then rush to eat it. Like
That's
we
right.
like we make we have all these memories and we just rush through life. Can you talk about that? Because I think that's so important.
Yes, that was about a tomato sandwich, oddly enough. In the summer, we get these wonderful tomatoes that are so much better than what you get in the winter. And we've all had the best tomato sandwiches in the world. You toast your really white bread and you put mayonnaise on it, and then you put your luscious tomatoes on it, and then you wolf it down. And so I said I wanted my sandwich back so that I could enjoy it, slowly, mindfully. And then I said something like, "Isn't that the way things are, that we rush through life and mind and let things slip away?" And then I remember another poem about skin, and that was something simply about taking a shower. That we rush through the shower usually. We don't think about how enjoyable it is. And just, something we have to do, and then we get out. And you can make a shower very enjoyable for your skin if you think about it. And you can give yourself a little massage, with the power of the shower. And so I wrote a little poem about that, that you can start your day a little more mindfully, just enjoy.
Yes. Yes, that's something we all can learn. And I love I love also the fact you wrote a poem called The Bookshelf. And I love the fact that you talk about being open and open to learning things and reading so many books, trying to understand. I think this is very important in this climate that we find ourselves in, that we need to open ourselves and learn more about each other and the world around us. I know you said that that basically that love you found that love is everything and the only thing that has meaning. And I love that you say at the very end, we are souls in bodies. That really hit me when you said those kinds of things. Can you talk more about your journey with being open and learning so many different things and how the learning helped you?
Yes, my husband's death in 2013 was a great catalyst for me. Uh, it unleashed the creativity that you saw in that book. I was an English major, and I wrote in all my careers, but never wrote poetry, never felt like it. But these inspirations kept coming to me. And so his death triggered all this, and my retirement. Of course, you have to have time to write, both of those things combined. um, Triggered the creativity that came. But also, I went on a real serious spiritual journey. I would go outdoors at night and I would look at the stars and I would say, where are you? I'm not getting anything. I'm not getting any signs. And I was just getting crickets. And I did uh, have a visitation several months after my husband died. I do believe that I had a very vivid dream where I think he did appear to me. But that was the only connection that I had with him, and that was brief, and that didn't happen again. Um, so I became open to all kinds of spiritual quests, and my first encounter with the other side was through a medium that I met at a writer's retreat. And she had written a book called Friends in High Places, which was kind of a cute title. She was, if you can believe this, a ghostbuster, and she and her friends would go around and relieve the ghosts from where they were hanging out and telling them that they needed to go on to a better place. And so she was an amateur medium. She didn't charge for her services. So I said, we were suite mates. And I said, Katie, do you think you could channel my late husband? And she said, yes, she thought she could. I gave his name, and she went into her room with a yellow notepad and came back with a perfect description of him. She said, he said that he'd rather talk to me, Suzanne, or, rather than Katie. But I said, I don't know how to do that. And it would take me a long time to learn how to do that, although I'm told that we can all learn to tap into the other side if we work on it. But I preferred to work with professionals, who would really get it right. And so I went on to find a professional medium. Her name is Jana Anna, and she lives in Indiana. Rhymes.
Yeah.
And so I've had probably 30 sessions with Jana over the years.
Mhm.
I didn't really obsess about it. I limited my first ones to maybe once or twice a year when I wanted to talk to my husband. And and then that branched out to my mother and father. And recently I lost two brothers and I've spoken with all of them. And I believe I got the real thing. So I was open to mediumship. And one thing led to another. And I don't know whether we want to get into all the woo woo stuff or not, but I did learn, I wrote a metaphysical book
Mhm.
about a famous person, Thomas Jefferson, as a
Mhm.
result of getting into the mediumship. But so I got into a lot of areas that I didn't know about. I got into reincarnation. Well, first of all, near death experiences. Now, if anybody has not read a book about the near death experience or listened to accounts online, there are thousands of accounts online that I find very credible. Please do that because you will have a new idea about how things work in this universe. And it's not what we were taught growing up. A lot of it, it's not. And if you grew up in a judgmental church,
Mhm.
and lots of people did, where God is just an angry old man looking for every little sin that you commit. That's not true. And thousands and thousands of documented near death experiences all say the same thing. Now, they vary in other respects. Their stories are all different, but they're like five commonalities. The one and only commonality that remains true of all of those hundreds of thousands of experiences is that immediately after leaving the body, they look down on the body and they say, "That's me down there, but I'm me here. How could that be?" And then they are completely enveloped in unconditional love. And they all identify that as the creator, as the one who loves us and made us and wants us to be, better people than we are. And they all come back changed. And most of them go on to be better people. Some are trauma, never get the experience right, but most of them get it right. And they change their lives completely and become better people as a result of being shown what they consider the truth. And so I read a lot of books about near death experiences, about what happens on the other side. Um, I read what mediums are saying, and some of the books are real cute, like Can Dead People See a Shower or something like that.
Yeah.
But I did learn that our spirits, the people who have loved us, they're in heaven, and there is a heaven. There really is.
Mhm.
And that's, I had that corroborated by all these people.
Mhm.
And I believe them. They're all credible. They're not religious people, most of them who give these near death experience accounts. They're former atheists, agnostics, or didn't care. And so that was the near death experience study that I did. Read a lot of books. And then that led to a book that I read on reincarnation called Many Lives, Many Masters. And that was written by a psychiatrist. By the way, before I leave the near death experience, I didn't go to religion for any answers because I already knew what religion said about the afterlife. And the Christian religion, does talk about heaven and all those things. And Jesus said, and I go to prepare a place for you. In my house are many mansions.
Mhm.
Well, that was almost all that he said about, the reality of the other side. And so that made me wonder, well, what kind of mansions, like a Dutch colonial or
Mhm.
Spanish or what? But I did find out that we can create whatever we want on the other side telepathically.
Mhm.
But I didn't go to religion for the answers that I was seeking. because since the mid 1970s, we've had credible doctors like Dr. Moody at the University of Virginia, who broke the first near-death experience study of 100 people who had this experience. He was very, very brave to do that. And those that followed him, those psychiatrists and PhD researchers who followed him, were putting their credibility on the line. And a lot of people said, oh, no, that can't be true, because most doctors are trained in materialism. There's nothing spiritual about their training. So if you can't put it in a test tube or see it or taste it or hear it, it's not real. No acceptance of the spiritual realities. So these people who wrote about the near-death experience, Dr. Moody being the first and followed by many others, other doctors too, were very, very brave. And they've made a huge difference in this world because they've changed our whole worldview. So then after that, there was a psychiatrist, MD psychiatrist, a Jewish guy who did not believe in reincarnation. Last thing on his mind. He was head of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Hospital in Florida. He had a patient who had many, many phobias, and he couldn't get to them. He thought maybe they were related to her early childhood, but they weren't. And the more she talked under hypnosis, these past lives kept coming up. And each time she would talk about a certain past life that was traumatic, the phobia would go away.
Mm.
And so he wrote a book about it called Many Lives, Many Masters. And so that got me on the reincarnation track.
Mm.
And a lot of very credible people. We grew up thinking that reincarnation was just Eastern mysticism and nothing much to it. It's what less sophisticated people believed in. We were the sophisticates because we are materialists. We only believe in material things. Not true. It's the spirit. It's the things you can't see that really run the universe, and that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that led me to some other books. These books by a PhD psychologist, Dr. Michael Newton, and he didn't believe in any of these things, reincarnation or life between lives. But he put about 1,000 patients under deep hypnosis, and their life, and they talked about life between lives, what goes on there. And it's all a school where you learn to be a better person the next time around, but you can also have fun.
Yeah, yeah. That's cool. That's so interesting. And I love that you talk about that, wanting to be a better person. And I love too that you speak about love being the most important thing that we as humans can do. And just now you talked about being a better person and loving and the whole being open and listening. Was that a freeing experience for you, the being open and listening and reading and all this research? Or was it because some people are always like, I don't want to do all that work. And so they just don't. And I feel like the work is part of the journey and it brings joy and freedom. But do you agree with that with your experience?
Oh, yes. What I found out is love is everything. Um, Nothing else matters. Most of these near-death experience people, not all of them, but most of them have what's called a life review. It's like a wraparound movie. And everything we think, say, and do apparently is recorded on the other side. We are shown the recordings in video form, I guess, of our lives. We are shown what we did. It doesn't matter if you were like an archbishop or that you gave $100 million to a charity. Those things don't matter. The only thing that matters is how your life, you affected other people, one-on-one. And so one person recalled that he was a schoolyard bully. And he was made to get into the little boy's skin that he had bullied. He was made to feel all of the heartbreak and the anxiety that he had given this little boy. He was also made to see some of the good things that he had done. He had helped a homeless person. And the ripple effect of that, the homeless person got back on his feet and his children got better. Everything got better. But there's also a ripple effect from our negative actions and thoughts. Our thoughts don't just stay in our head, they go, they have energy. So, what I learned is that love is everything. And we don't have to do anything really super big, you know, give a lot to charities, although we should be doing that if we can afford to, but give it with a good heart, not to feel better about yourself, but a good heart about helping other people. It's all in the heart. And so I've read some books on that were filled with little acts of kindness. And there's one book I'd highly recommend. It's called Theo of Golden. Golden is a made up city in North Carolina. Theo is a mysterious person. Anyway, that little book changed my life. There's hardly any book that's changed my life, I'll tell you. But that book seriously made me think about the importance of little acts of kindness. And we can do those without a whole lot of effort. And very small things like chatting it up with the checkout lady at the supermarket, helping her day go, recognizing her as a person, helping her day go better. Little things. And the same with negativity. If you bark at the checkout lady, for something that's going on in the rest of the store, just because you feel like barking, well, you probably ruined her day. She's going to go home and not be happy with her family, because she's in a bad mood. You put her in a bad mood. Okay. Everything we do has a ripple effect, including our thoughts. So we've got to be very careful about what we think. There's, as we know, there's terrible negativity going on at the top of our culture right now. I had to, I used to be a news hound when the news wasn't so awful. When you just wanted to be informed, I wanted to be informed. So I listened to the news in the morning, at noon, during dinner, 11 o'clock news. I was a real news hound. I cannot do that anymore. It's poison. And so I do stay informed, but I do it in a very limited way because it's very important for the rest of us. The negative people are doing what they do at the top, and they're very visible. But there's a lot of us down here who are not like that. And we have to put out positive energy to counteract the negative energy. And it is kind of an energy war on this planet. And we've got to make sure that there's more positive energy than negative. And so I limit, I don't watch terror, I don't read horror books or watch horror movies. I think they're terrible. A lot of people use those things as escapist methods, but I think they pollute your mind. And so I try to dwell in positive thoughts. If I'm having a resentment against somebody, I'll try to send a good thought to that person and not resent that person. Resentments are very bad. We should get rid of all of our resentments. They're poisonous. I've learned that too. And so the book I'm writing now, it's interesting. I thought I wrote that book 20 years ago, but I didn't. I wrote it, but it was not the book that I was intended to write. I kept my 4 main characters. I kept the storyline, but I completely rewrote the book within the last 6 weeks. And I've purposely put little acts of kindness in it because that people really relate to that. And I've put a lot of wisdom in it that I've accumulated over the last 20 years that I didn't have before. And a lot of dialogue. Before I was just talking about the scenery too much. But now I have a lot of wisdom coming through these characters. And I have friends in AA, and I've attended a lot of AA meetings. And in this book, which should be out, I hope maybe early next year, it's called The Language of Hearts. And it's all there's love throughout the book. But there's also a lot of conflict, well, turmoil and, people in trouble. People you love it when your characters are in trouble. But I put a lot of AA wisdom in there. And if anybody's listening to you who is worried about it drinking, that drinking might not be good for you, I do recommend AA. There's so much wisdom in AA. It's not just about drinking, it's about becoming a better person. And we all should want to be better people. We should want to. And there's a lot of AA wisdom in that book that I didn't have before I became exposed to it.
Oh, wow. And I love that because I have several friends that don't even drink, but they go to AA meetings for just what you said, that there's so much wisdom there and the things that they teach, even if you don't have an addiction problem.
That's right.
That's just a resource for you, for
That's
all
right.
of us.
Yeah, I actually, my husband goes. We will attend meetings because I get the wisdom, and he's not even a drinker, but he's a workaholic, and so we all have our isms, even though it's not alcoholism. We all have our isms, and so what AA does, the AA program, is we work on our other isms too, because they cause us to drink and drug and not be the people that we should be.
Yes, yes. And I love too that you talk about this new book and how important it is for small acts of kindness. That's what we're talking about this month with the podcast and how important they are. And I love that you said the ripple effect of talking to your cashier or and the positive ripple effect and the negative, because I think so many times, you know, we think about the positive, but we don't think about the negative and that we shouldn't have negative reactions like that. So can you talk more about that? Have you ever had one of those encounters that changed your life or just made a ripple effect because someone wanted to be kind?
I have. Um, I can't remember a specific instance, but um, I do want to say that I do teach. I was asked to teach a course in love and forgiveness, and we talk about the little things in there. Um, and we talk about trash talk and how you know if it's cute and funny and not hurtful, that's okay. But lots of times it's hurtful. And so I I teach a course at a rehab place. It's a year-round in house rehab center called the Healing Place here in Richmond, Virginia. And the staff was overwhelmed with work, and they asked some of us volunteers. I was already volunteering there to please teach some of their classes. So I got to teach emotional intelligence and love and forgiveness. And we do talk about the small things that have a ripple effect. That's a big part of what we work on, and our resentments, and and again, just how to become better people. And I think those people who are in that program, they came in not as winners. Okay, they were unsuccessful, and that's why they enrolled themselves or their family told them to go there. It's the best program in the world, as far as I'm concerned. It's called the Healing Place. And they come in lower than oil do, and they hate themselves and they hate the world, a lot of them. And so they are taught through the 12 steps of AA to learn to love themselves and learn to love and forgive others. And I see people change right in front of my eyes. I've seen that in AA because it's a spiritual program. And little things like I asked them, what's the worst thing you can do in a divorce when there are children involved? And of course, they don't know that because they've all done it. And then some of them will say, talking bad about the other parent. I said, you're right. I said, you've got to it's very tempting to do that, but you've got to resist it because that child is half of that other parent. And that child, if the parent is a deadbeat, child will learn that on his or her own. You don't have to tell them that. They'll know it. So just shut up and try to, make the situation as good as it can be under the circumstances.
Yes, yes. That's totally great. I wrote a book as well, and it was about my encounter with a total stranger, and the impact. They just paused and listened to me, and they didn't have to do that because it was a busy person. It looked like they were so incredibly busy, and they just took the time to just stop and listen to me. They came over and "How can I help you?" And I just blah, started blurting out all these things. And what's interesting to me is that they noticed. They even noticed that I was having problems. It's more like we have to be mindful. We have to be aware of things around us. Do you agree with that whole concept?
Yes, I do remember somebody being kind to me. Yeah, I remember that vividly. I was on a mission trip down in Belize, and we were, it was a medical mission trip, and I was like Vanna White pointing to the eye chart. That's all I could do. And anyway, I was in a little cinder block place with two other women. And this was maybe 2 years after my husband died. And so I was standing at a counter where they were giving out soft drinks. It was nighttime, and I just lost it. You know, for some reason, just the grief came on then, and I tried to hide it, but I left and I went down to the little cinder block place where we were staying, and one of my roommates sort of sensed that I was in trouble, and she came, and she's never been married, but she held my hand, and she was so understanding of my grief, and she became one of my good friends after that. I just thought she was wonderful.
Yes, yes. That's fabulous. Which brings me to another thought. In your book, it seems like you talk about loneliness um, in depth. It's woven throughout there, and you have this this one poem called "The Bed," and how when you had your husband was sick, very sick with cancer. Or isn't that correct? With
Yes, yes,
yeah, and they wanted you to bring in like a medical hospital bed, and you said no because my husband will be alone. And you talked about how the bed, you or his children would stay, and one would be like up and watching if anybody needed anything, and the other would be in the bed with him. And that really touched me because so many people, I feel like, in a huge part of the problem that we see today is loneliness. People just feel alone, and you can feel alone and be in a room of people, and I think there's just not that connection anymore, and we all want to be uh with people and seen and heard. And now you've just spoken about earlier you spoke about dignity and treating people as human beings. Can you talk more about that and the importance that you have found of that?
yes. Well, my first my late husband had, 2 medical problems. The first one was he was in an accident and, broke some bones, and, so we did have a hospital bed for that. We took the dining room table out and put him in the dining room in a hospital bed. But, my our bedroom was upstairs, and, of course, there was no room for me to be with him, and so, I retreated upstairs. And, that was okay because he needed to be in that hospital bed, but it was a lesson for the future. So when he did get cancer and he was in hospice, we knew that he was dying. It would only be a matter of days. So he had 3 children from a previous marriage, and we had 2. So there were 5 children involved, and they flew in from all the places they were living, and for the vigil to be there. Thank God I didn't leave him in the hospital for one final shot of chemo. You know, that would not have been the thing to do. A lot of people die lonely in hospitals. They shouldn't do that. You should come home. You're not going to thwart death. We're all going to die. Might as well die peacefully at home. The sooner you can get home, the better. And so when they brought, and this is in the poem called "The Bed," when they brought my husband in on a stretcher, I had we had a fold-out sofa bed in the den, and I prepared that for him, and it was good size. It was like queen size, and so I didn't want him to be alone, and so we had enough people, his 5 children and I, that we could keep him company 24/7. And so I let his out-of-town children be first and do most of it because they didn't see him as often. And so they would keep vigil 2 at a time. And one of them took notes about the funny things he said. Or one time he said he wanted a hug, and so they were there to give him a hug. And that was very important. When he died, it was interesting. The hour he died, um, I'm a pretty organized person, and I felt that it was important not to wait till the last minute to plan the funeral. I knew the funeral was coming. Couldn't deny that. A lot of people want to deny that, but you can't deny it. And so I had the minister over, and we were sitting in the front room discussing the funeral. Some of the children didn't want to do that. They didn't, just wasn't comfortable for them. But I was in charge of all that. I had to get it done. It was my job. They didn't know how to put a funeral on. And living in Richmond, I've been to a lot of funerals, and some are well done and some aren't, you know. And so I was talking to our minister, and then there was a nurse in the other room, and she said, "I think you should come in here now. I think it's time." So the minister was there to give the last rites, and it was beautiful. And my husband's soul left right then. And one of his children, one of his sons, couldn't be there at that moment. He came later and lost it, just broke down. And I thought it was better for him not to have been there at that moment, because we all knew that it was a holy moment. So yeah, there's loneliness everywhere. And after Ned died, I knew that I was going to have some lonely days, or days with nothing to do. And I made a point to make some new friends, because a lot of my friends were couples, and couples hang out with couples. And so I thought of every single female that I knew who was interesting, that I might want to have lunch or dinner with or do stuff with. And I made a point to ask them to lunch and, become friends with them. And that helped a lot. But we can't just sit home and hope that friends will come to us and knock on our door. That's not going to happen. We have to be proactive. And I joined some clubs and got active in the community and, did volunteer work. And I stayed busy, and then I had my books to write, and that really helped a lot. But yeah, you can be lonely or you can choose not to be lonely.
Right. Yeah, it's all a choice. Like you say, all a choice. Everything I feel like is a choice. Even to be loving or to not be loving is a choice as well. Um, so, what can you? Is there any last things that you want to leave with our listeners?
Well, last night I heard something. I was listening to near death experience at camp and wrote down what the man said. And he said, love is the fuel of humanity, it fuels us. We have to realize that. Embrace love. Don't be afraid of it. And love is not just physical love between a man and a woman. That's one type of love, but there are many other types of love. And uh, our dogs and cats are here to give us love. If we're lonely, um, if I find myself alone in the future, I will get a dog because they're given to us to love us, unconditionally. They don't talk back. But or giving something to a homeless person. It's a small act of love. Being good to nature, not using pesticides. That's an act of love. Um, Honoring our environment. Not throwing trash out the window or a beer can in the river or cigarette butts out the car. Little things like that are acts of love because we're trying to make the world a better place. So I'd say just start with little things, chat it up with the grocery store clerk and, do some volunteer work, work in a homeless shelter. Just we should open our hearts. Uh, we are we are made to love. We are supposed to love. That is our purpose here, and we need to find ways to be more loving.
Yes, yes. I love that you talk about our our um our homeless uh individuals because I did a lot of work back in Charleston, South Carolina, where I live, with our homeless population. And one gentleman, when I was talking to him, made such an impact on my life. He said, "Thank you for talking to me
Yes,
because people look at me or they look past me
yes,
and they look at me like I'm trash or I'm a problem when they do."
right.
And I feel like just if we can pour love into those people in those situations, they're still people too, and they have dignity and they deserve respect as well. Um,
That is so important. I have done that as well. And there was one, my husband and I were leaving a shopping center one day, and this man rode by on a bicycle, and I could see his shoulder blades through his shirt. He was hungry. And so I told my husband, I said, let's turn around and need to help that man. So he was sitting down by the time I came back, and I gave him, at the time, $20. It went a whole lot more than it does today. But at the time, it was, I could give him a couple of nice meals, fast meals. And I looked into his eyes and I talked to him. And he had the most beautiful blue eyes. And he wasn't a drunk, his eyes were clear. And he was a really nice guy. And I said, uh, what's going on with you? And he said, well, I have um, spasms. or I don't know, there's something greater than spasms. I can't, trying to think of the name, but seizures. Yeah, he has seizures. And so I said, where do you sleep? And he said, well, when it's cold, I sleep in the hospital visiting room on the sofas. Sometimes I sleep in the cars across the street at the car place. And so he he would look for me, and I would look for him after that, and we would talk. And he would say, "Tell your husband hello for me," that kind of thing. And I haven't seen him recently. I don't know. I tried to give him. Uh, we have a handout sheet that I give homeless people of places where they can go to eat and sleep. Richmond is fairly good about the homeless population, better than some cities, I think. It's still not perfect. There's still people out there in the environment who should be somewhere. But um, yeah, it's very important to recognize people. Um, and yet again, the checkout lady doesn't get recognized. Read her name tag, say her name, look her in the eye. And people like that. I keep going back to the checkout lady, but there's plenty of people like that that we can recognize. Look them in the eye and call their name and ask how they're doing.
Well, that's wonderful, Suzanne. And I thank you so much for coming with us, for sharing with us. I know our listeners will benefit so, so much from your words of wisdom. And you're welcome anytime on the podcast in the future. So I just want to thank you for coming. And I want our listeners to remember that you do not have to suffer alone.